Hello and welcome back to Market Shares. I'm your host, Tony Blodgett, and today I have another awesome interview for all of you. I have my friend Deb Byrd on today, someone that I've been wanting to get on to Market Shares really since I started this whole journey. She probably doesn't know this, but I've also drawn a lot of inspiration from Deborah over the years to do social media. And, that's so I'm hoping to learn some stuff from Deborah as well. Someone I really look up to, specifically in the mortgage space, but around social media. She works with a lot of top performers and really people that are looking to grow their own social media presence and brand. So Deborah, welcome to Market Shares. Thank you for joining us.
Well, it's a pleasure, and thank you for having me on. I appreciate you committing your time, energy, effort into sharing your wisdom. I'll never forget Denise, for those who don't know, my twin, Denise Donahue, the mortgage nerd, said that she had done her Amplify experience with you and was like forever changed from that, time, and said a lot of great things about you. So thank you for having me on, and I appreciate you sharing your gift to millions online.
Yeah, well, someday it'll be millions watching this, but maybe amongst all of our episodes, we're very consistent with our episodes here. But yeah, no, I love this industry, and I think it shines through in the content that I produce. But I try to do both educational and kind of unpacking the more complex parts of our industry, which can be complicated and difficult to explain in a video. But I also like to leverage the relationships that I have around the industry and bring those awesome people to the growing audience here at Market Shares. So what I love about what you do, Deborah, is not only do you have kind of an educational background, and I'll have you give a quick backstory and kind of your how you came up into the mortgage industry, but you have an educational background, which I think is awesome, and then you focus on social media, which is so important to all of us, but yet everyone has a different version of what social media is and how to best leverage the platforms that are out there. And you have your own special spin on it. So I'm looking forward to having you share that with our audience. And then maybe even if someone is interested in how can they get some guidance and mentorship from you. I know that you own a social media company, Plug and Play SM for social media, but you also provide just tons of content to the industry in different interviews and things that you do as well. So there's lots of ways for people to get ideas and tips from Deborah besides engaging with her. But if you do want to engage with her, she does run a social media company and helps, like I said, a lot of great producers around the country get that. So maybe let's start a little bit with your background, and then we're going to get into some of the, some of your ideas and strategies around social media. And then I have some other questions I want to ask you as well.
Yeah, so I started off as a middle school science teacher and girls athletic coach. It was not because I was great at school. I was the kid that struggled. Like I would use a PVC pipe and whisper into it so it would echo in my ear. And I was more social and probably just excelled at school because I had to play sports. And I chose to teach that age group because I felt like that was your last chance with a lot of kids to really change the trajectory of their life. And so impact has always been a big deal for me. And obviously when you coach, you get to dive deeper with kids just from sitting on a curb waiting for the bus to come pick up after a game. You could just really get inside their hearts, their souls. And again, once you form that relationship, they would go through a brick wall for you. So I taught science simply because you could blow things up in a lab. And the whole kind of concept of science starts with a problem and how do you solve the problem, which was, to me, I could, intertwine life stories and events and really teach them beyond just what the textbook maybe said I had to teach. And I always kind of rooted for the underdog. And that's kind of even true today where, every year I would say, give me all the kids nobody else wants, like the problem kids, the ESL, the special ed. Don't put me with a bunch of pre-AP. Like they will ask me questions that I'm like, I don't know. And I don't care. Like go to Google. I want the ones that need some love and to re-believe in themselves. That way they can, be all that they can be. And so, long story short, I was pregnant with my fourth kid, which I was told I would never be able to have children, FYI. And I ended up having 4 in 5.5 years. So that just tells you, tell me I can't do something and I'll do it 4 times in 5.5 years. But my husband was a head baseball coach and math teacher as well. And so once we were having our 4th child, it's tough to raise kids on 2 teacher salaries. And so my twin sister was in the mortgage industry, and she was like, you send me more closed deals each month than my top real estate partners. Like, have you ever thought about mortgage? And I was like, no way. I'm not a salesperson. I'm more of a teacher, a servant. There's no way I could do sales. And she was like, well, it's really just about relationships and connections. And then when she started telling me how much money you could make, I was like, well, I'm pretty good at connecting people. And so that was 2012. And my first week on the job, we ended up going to High Trust. Actually, it was Sales Mastery, where Dan Keller was on stage. And that's when just kind of the light bulb clicked for me, where I was like, social media is just the largest digital classroom out there, where most people spend their time where they want to learn, not where they're forced to learn, like the school system. And I could create and develop curriculum just like I do now, but do it more with financial literacy and create, some of those paradigm shifts that are needed so that it's not dependent on the media and the news. And so it just kind of evolved, where as I was, kind of cutting my teeth learning the industry, which I got to tell you, it's tough. Like, I started off at a correspondent lender where it wasn't direct, and we had all these different overlays, and I was like, I just locked a deal with Wells Fargo, and but I didn't look at the refreshed overlays, and I was like, why do they make it so complicated? And why do so many people, why do so many check a 1003? Like, where it was like the loan officer, a production partner, a processor, an underwriter, a closer. I'm like, it's the same document that like so many people touch. So, just learning the business, plus then focusing on business development. And, I probably took every single certification you could possibly take, just because I've always been a student at heart. And, then it evolved into, all right, now I'm going to go out on my own and be my own loan officer. And let me tell you, for those of you listening and you've ever wondered, like, how do I stand out? It feels like we all sell the same thing. I just want you for a second to imagine that your identical twin is the mortgage nerd. You guys look alike, sound alike, same company, same product. And I had to figure out why me? And what's my X factor? And so I really fell in love with that process, which then evolved to Plug and Play SM, where I didn't want to feel restricted in only helping maybe our company at the time. And how could I reach and help loan officers all over the U.S., regardless of who they work for, that as long as they had the desire and the core belief or value of wanting to reach more people and spread financial literacy, then I wanted to be able to help them. And so then I created Plug and Play SM, and that's what we do. We specialize with, loan officers. It doesn't matter how much production. It could be 1 deal a month, 1 deal every 6 months. We have different packages to help bridge the gap from not only just marketing activities, but also sales activities. Because, I want to help those rising stars become on stage one day, just like when I was in, 2012, looking up at Denise and Jeremy and Dan, and I thought maybe one day I could be them. And then now I'm on those same stages. So it's been great.
Yeah, you are on those stages. And well, congratulations to you for, creating the lane in this industry that fits best with, your strengths and your passions. It's not easy for most people to do. And for those that don't know her sister, the mortgage nerd, Denise Donahue, she is a monster producer. I don't even want to guess how many units a year she does, but it's in the 700 range, I think. So this is quite the shadow to be in as you're breaking into the mortgage industry. I can only imagine, but you guys are both so strong in what you do, and it's really cool to see both of you and your success in this industry. So let's talk a little bit about kind of your approach to social media, because like you said, I think, you are the kind of person who aligns with maybe someone who I can just imagine someone who says, look, I don't have the face for social media. I don't have the personality for social media. You look at some of the very polished people. Well, we'll use your sister as an example, and you go, I'm not a Denise Donahue. I'm not a Jeremy Forcier. I don't have that presence and that charisma. So I'm just not going to do it because I don't want to compete with that. I imagine that that's the perfect person who you might say, you know what, you can do it. And there is an approach that's going to align with your personality, your clientele, and the story that you want to tell. So, I mean, did I get that right? Is that a fair assumption that that's someone that you would align with? And then, perfect. And then how would you, so maybe talk about what would that approach look like that might be different? And it's not always going to be, I mean, I'm sure you have a lot of clients who it comes natural and they just want to take it to the next level, but there's a whole spectrum of people, just like there are middle school students, I would imagine. And, how do you align with someone and help them find their way of getting out of their shell, perhaps, and getting comfortable with social media?
Well, I would say there's a couple things. They're at a point where their production's not where they want it to be, and they know they need to do something different. And sometimes they don't really know what that is. They just know what used to work isn't working, and they've heard maybe social media could be a place where they could start. They just don't even know where to begin. And then there's some that just don't believe in it at all. They don't understand the value. They don't see how it works. And then others that are kind of stuck in between is where I would say the three kind of layers are. And, it's a real thing that if you look at just the demographics, like let's just say with baby boomers, they were well established in their career before social media came about. So the thought of like taking a picture of what you eat and posting it, they're like, why would anybody care? And then you look at Gen Xers that were, they're typically in a lot of your leadership positions. They were younger, like just starting their careers when social came about. But it's also when 90210 and Friends sitcoms came about. And so they're more social beings where they're like, if I want to get together with people, like, let's go have dinner, let's have a party. It's a little bit more friction with them in constantly thinking of, oh, maybe I should post this, or maybe I should share this experience with the world. And so that's why when you see millennials and even Gen Zs, there's less friction where you could ask them to create, a video testimonial for you, like say it's your client, and they could whip that out, no problem. They've always been integrated with the technology. They, in fact, don't even really see the difference between an online and offline world because it's always been integrated. And so it comes much more natural for them. However, where they struggle is typically then the conversion for once you create the opportunity, then what? And so, or knowing what to talk about. So there's, the first layer is where do you fit in there? And then what do you believe to be true of why you should be on social? Like, what is the goal? Because everybody's end goal is sometimes different. Sometimes they're just taking what they've heard from a different top producer and they're projecting it on their own. And you kind of word vomit it word for word what I've heard from lots of people over and over and over. And then others are like, well, I don't know. I do know that, my peers are saying when they go to different networking events, they have others that come up to them and they're like, wow, I feel like I already know you. And I'm like, okay. So for me, the biggest miss that most don't understand of like the cost of not posting and not being on social is you have no way to control the narrative gap. Meaning in today's day and age, and I think really COVID expedited this, most people, it still starts with a word of mouth referral, but we're all still trained to then go to reviews where they're going to go online, they're going to search you. And if they can't find you, then you're allowing it to be up to them to create this story in their head of like, man, I was referred to Tony, but I can't find him. Maybe he got out of the business. Like, I know the market's been tough. I know rates are high. Like, maybe he's one of those that chose to get out. And so there's this narrative gap. And to me, the best way to control that gap is to then create it. And so why not have an online transparency of your resume where it's really no different than what we've always done around, say, reputation. This is just reputation at scale. So, I think so many people think social has to be something other than what it really is. And I believe the approach should be it's an extension to your CRM because that's where human eyeballs are. You can still text and, do phone calls and emails, but why would you not approach your social media no different than a CRM, which means you do need to be proactive on following, liking, commenting on other accounts. It's also a reputation management. So let's say you have one bad deal that goes, crazy, and we all have crazy clients every once in a while. And if more likely than not, people will share a negative experience and a positive experience online. So if you don't have anything else to debunk that one negative comment, then that person is left to believe that that's probably how you run your business. That's your reputation. But if you had all these other, pieces of content or reviews where people are like, it's possible that could just be one crazy, person, or that was a one-off situation. So extension of your CRM, database management, reputation management, and then again, just your digital presence of a first impression so that you can accelerate trust and increase conversion from the moment someone's referred to you simply by what you're putting out there from a daily basis. So that's kind of the big why you need to be on social. And the opportunity cost by not being on it is you don't even know how many at-bats you're losing usually, because you wouldn't know that. And then it's, okay, so what do you post? How do you post? Where do you show up? That's usually the next layer that people either overthink or they get in their head of, I don't really like the way I look, or I don't like the way I sound, or, I was told to create valuable content. And I'm like, great. How do you define value? Because that's really subjective on who your audience is. And you can only get value, you can't give value. So how do you identify who are the people you want to serve and what are the problems or challenges that they have, and just go deeper on that, which is beyond demographics. It's also the psychographics of what challenges are going on in their life. Where do they hang out? Are they gamers? What are the things of interest to them? What are the things that they're searching? So then you can create more relevant and valuable content based off the people that you want to serve, because it should be for them.
Yeah. So much to unpack there. So a couple things that I would ask you, and really just specifically about that piece of it regarding who's your audience. This is actually something that I struggled with greatly when I was trying to figure out just how I was going to do this podcast, in all honesty. And the reason why is because I felt like, for me, and we'll make this a Tony coaching session for a minute, there's a lot of different people that I would want to speak to, right? So I feel like I have education that I could provide to consumers, right? Even though I don't originate loans, there's a lot that I've learned and a lot of education that I could give to consumers. So it's like, okay, maybe some of my content is for consumers. And then it's for like loan officers too, because, I've been a loan officer, I managed loan officers and so on and so forth. So maybe my content is really focused towards loan officers, but maybe it's really more towards leaders, right? I mean, I'm an executive level management now. And so I've spent a lot of time coaching, mentoring, people that are in a leadership position, or people that want to go from production to leadership. So maybe that's kind of, my audience. And I was really like paralyzed by this idea of who am I even talking to when I do a podcast? And I don't even know if today I've fully landed on it, to be quite honest with you. I think that mostly, and then the other audience would be real estate agents, because I've been soliciting business from real estate agents for my whole career, and am still at a high level helping to build our brand in the real estate community for our loan officers to have those relationships, right? And so I always think that I'm kind of geared towards real estate agents and loan officers, and a little bit of consumers. But for me, it really kept me from even moving forward with putting out content or doing a podcast at all. And so luckily I just started. I gear most of my content towards loan officers now, but I still spill into all of those kind of buckets. So if you had someone kind of in that situation, which is I don't really know who my audience is, for me, I distilled it down to, in my daily job, who's the person that I need to influence the most, right? And for me, it's probably loan officers, right? I mean, I recruit, I build teams. They're the ones that are doing the bulk of the production. So that's kind of how I helped align. But how would you help someone zero in on, if they have multiple audiences, what is their primary focus? And is it okay to maybe cater to multiple audiences, and that's okay? What are your thoughts on that?
It is. And there's a difference between a business brand and a personal brand. And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck. I have two different accounts. I have my Deborah A. Byrd, which is the personal side, the personal brand, which, by the way, always has the bigger following. Like,
Yeah.
you could look at just Elon Musk and Tesla, and people fall in love with the human more so than the brand. So there's a difference between your company brand and your personal brand. I think the reason why people get so stuck on the personal brand is they feel like they have to commit to that person when hopefully we're evolving, and you should be evolving. And so for me, it's always easiest to speak to the person that you were 5, 10, 15 years ago, because these are things that you've had to personally overcome. These are beliefs that you have based off your prior experiences, and all of those experiences and education and your environment is ultimately what shapes your lens. And that's I call it the 3 E's of how we see things, because you could have someone like myself and an identical twin who were raised in the exact same home life, but could come out of it with very different perceptions based off different experiences and different environments that we may have been in. And so no different than when you watch, like I was watching Shaq and Charles Barkley on the NBA. I'm a big NBA. I love basketball. And I choose to tune in, even though it's late because it's like 11:30 my time. But I love hearing their narrative around the same thing that all these other commentators could be sharing, but I tune into them because of how they share and their vibe and their energy. No different than when people, if they turn on the news, they're going to choose certain news channels because of the person and how they filter or how they display the information. So when you're sitting there thinking, okay, how do I identify, like even just with this podcast that you're doing, I would ask you, what is ultimately the goal of the podcast? And you would say?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think the biggest goal is just to, I'm a student of Renee, right? So amplify my influence, right? I mean, that's probably the biggest goal that I had is, I wasn't on social media. I have personal pages. I don't really use them very often. I post, very little on both my personal Instagram or my Facebook page. It's really just a little bit of family stuff here and there, and not even a lot of that. And so I just didn't really have a presence. So I was like, well, I need to go somewhere. And I like podcasts. I listen to them all the time. And so I like the format. I like the longer form versus just trying to sit there and think about a 30 to 1 minute clip. I'd rather have a conversation with someone and then find the nuggets in there and then use those as my clip. So it seemed like an efficient way, if I'm being honest with you, for me to do something I was passionate about, unpack more complex types of situations because that worked well for me, and kind of, I don't want to just say check that box, but be able to say, hey, I have a social media presence. If people want to learn about me, my philosophies, and how I do things, this is a way for them to peek in onto who I am and what I'm about and my network, without having to meet me in person. So that's my why behind doing the podcast.
So the first thing I heard you say was to amplify your influence. And when you think about it, you are best positioned to influence who?
Well, the primary focus of my job is retention and recruiting of loan officers, salespeople, and sales leaders in the mortgage industry. So those are the people that I would be wanting to influence the most.
And it could also then be those who are trying to transition from, maybe originator, team lead to leadership, right?
100%. Yep.
So if you think about it, to amplify your influence, the only way you can influence someone in those areas is if you have also gone through and overcome or had some repeatable results of doing those things. And what a great way for you to visibly demonstrate that influence, where it's more, what I like about your podcast is it's the whole prove it mentality. I think that's where, there's no credentials needed for social media. Like anyone can be a guru.
Right.
Anyone can get on there and say anything. And so what I've been pushing on people is prove it. Like, we don't need another talking head video. We have plenty of information on the web. And if you ask me something that ChatGPT could answer, then you're not being valuable at that point. So prove to me that you are who you say you are and that you will do what you say you'll do, because ultimately that's what people are looking for when they go and they land on your feed, and they may never like, comment, follow. They're going there, they scroll for a couple feet, and they're judging you based off two things. Usually it's warmth and competency. Like, can I trust this person? Are they going to protect my self-interest? Have they been able to do this for other people? Now I feel confident enough to then contact you. But it could be misleading, because on a lead form, it may say, oh, my real estate agent referred me. Well, that's true, but it's no longer just some linear sales funnel. It's not linear anymore. There's all these different influences that are coming at us. And so how do we make sure that you're positioned where, people can easily learn more about who you are, where the best way to do that is video. And I recommend this very thing, Tony, so you're actually living proof. And Dave Savage is the one that was my go-to example, where here's between Dave Savage and Bill Hart. I'm like, these are dudes in their 60s, I think. I think Dave may be 59, so don't quote me on that. But these are boomers that literally do great on social, and what they figured out and mastered is they do an interview that bleeds into all their content, where you could chop up the interview. It can fuel your, Twitter, YouTube Shorts, TikTok, all the other accounts just by doing one activity. And oh, by the way, it also then allows you to prospect and have great conversations with other industry experts that could also share, their gift and their wisdom to help, impact even more. So I think you are amplifying your influence, and who are you most influential of, and who are you trying to influence are the people that either you once were.
Yeah.
Right. Were you a loan officer at one point? I don't even know.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
See, so, if you tried to go and influence people on hair product, do you think that would be reason? No. So we typically naturally fall into our area or our scope that we naturally enjoy. It's just then feeling comfortable enough and allowing yourself to be yourself, and to speak and to say all the things that, you align with, while also being able to evolve. Because if you go back and you look at my footage from 10 years ago to 5 years ago, I hope that I'm not anything like that person from 5 years ago. Otherwise, I'm not growing. And so social is an accountability, because if you don't have something to share, you're probably not studying your trade.
Yeah.
It also helps you be better communicators, because if you have to make that 1-minute clip, or you have to do an interview like this, you're going to sharpen your skills naturally by the more reps that you do. And for those who don't consistently do anything, you're not going to get better at any of it, because it does take time, and we don't all start at the same starting line, yet we'll compare ourselves to, the Dan Kellers, where you look at his stuff and you're like, gosh, how does he speak like that? Like, he's so great. He didn't start that way, so just give yourself permission to suck at first. You don't have to post everything. Like, I even had a client, I'm like, I want you to create a private account and don't add anybody. Make it whatever name you want. And I just want you to build the habit. It's like going to the gym for the first time. Videotape yourself, post it. Nobody's going to see it, but just build the muscle. Get used to seeing yourself. Watch your game film so you can make small little tweaks and improve. But if that's where we have to start to baby step you into the process, that sometimes is where we have to start, because some people go and post their first video and I'm like, for the love of God, take that down. That is a brain killer. We got to work on this a little bit,
Well, I think that's what intimidates people though too, right? Like they're afraid of making that video that just makes them look, they're already nervous. Then I'm going to look even worse if I do this. And some people unfortunately do, and so that's where I think some coaching is helpful, and it sounds to me, correct me if I'm wrong, because we've never engaged in a working relationship together. And this is certainly not paid advertising or anything. So I don't know exactly what your process is, although I'm interested in learning more. But it sounds like you coach people a lot too. And I would imagine that even if someone said, hey, Deborah, I actually do a pretty decent job with my social media of getting comments and feedback and leads, if you will, but I don't capitalize on those at all. I can imagine you'd be like, yeah, I have some ideas for that. So it seems to me like your coaching might even be a little bit outside of, hey, here's how the algorithm works at, this particular social media platform, or this is the video you should do. I feel like my impression of you is you take a little bit more of a holistic approach to helping somebody not only decide how they want to do social media, what to do when they do social media, but then how to actually monetize that as well. Is that an area that you work in?
Yeah, because it's like, what are you doing all of this for? Because
Yeah.
for some, it's absolutely a distraction. So there's layers. That's why we have multiple different plans that, people can upgrade, downgrade, cancel anytime. I always tell them we don't do contracts, because if we're not exceeding expectations, we want it to be as easy for you to get out. But also we understand that sometimes you have assistants that are kind of blended roles, that sometimes we train the assistant, or we want to make it to where we can grow with you. But there is some sales coaching, some personal development coaching, because I will tell you that is the unsexy side of what most won't tell you. Is at the core, they don't value their opinion over the opinions of complete strangers. And so that there's a roadblock there. And we also help people with, your influence will only grow as deep as your personal character. And anytime that your influence is greater than your character, or then it usually implodes, which there's plenty of celebrity, examples of that. But it's the same model if your business grows to the extent that you do. And so what is the true motive with being on social? If it's meant to serve, then, and I have clients put ego on a sticky note on their monitor where they put a big X over the E. Because if you're worried about how you look or how you sound, then that means you're thinking of yourself, when the whole point of the content is meant to serve somebody else. And a silly example is I will say, if Jesus Christ were right here next to me and he had access to this phone, which connects you to millions, do you think he'd be like, I'm not going to share that. I don't like the way my beard looks. I think it looks off. Or would he just share his truth because he believes it's his truth, and people can reject it? He doesn't take it personally because his motive is meant to, serve. And so that's a place where we start. But also I can sometimes put the squeeze on people where I'm like, you're just choosing to distract yourself with Canva and social media, so you don't have to do the things you still have to do. Like, there is no hiding behind social where you still don't make sales calls and keep up with your database and do the daily activities that we have themed days around, where there's no magic pill to it. But it does take consistency, and it's also dependent on your reputation in the market center. So if you have a shitty reputation and you guys don't close on time, or you're known for high rates, or you don't call people back, and you just want to spend all this money on social, it's like, we need to get your system tightened up. Otherwise, you could get, I always give an example of a restaurant where you could get a lot of marketing to open up a restaurant, but if the cooks aren't ready and the floors are dirty and it smells bad and there's no toilet paper, then you just got a lot of people to your restaurant to leave them with a bad experience. So there's a method to the madness, and there's ways that we, generally starts with a discovery call to see what's real. Like, where are you at right now? Like, the real side of it from a business and personal side. What do you have capacity for? Because there's a lot of loan officers who have lost assistants and production partners, and they're like, I have to now relabel docs. I never had to do that before. Being a loan officer, you already have to wear 18 hats. So then to find time to be a content creator, it's like, how do you actually integrate creating relevant content into your workflow where it's not a distraction and it's optimized per your time, where you're leveraging out as much as you can that's beneath your hourly rate, so you can do the highest trust building activities possible and go gain more market share? Because that's our number one goal. Is we want to make sure we're connecting families to the people who need great advice. And I know a little bit of our upbringing and our childhood story. I've always wondered how it could have been different if my dad would have had a loan officer like you, or Dan Keller, or the nerd. Would we have had a different outcome? And so if I can connect people who need the advice to the loan officers who care to give it to them, then I want to be that connective tissue, which is kind of what I've always been and always done. It's just making sure that those people are visible, because being the invisible LO, you can't, not today. Like I
Yeah.
heard Dan Keller talk about social media in 2012. And I'm always amazed that we're still talking about it. I'm like, guys, this is not new, you know?
Yeah, I gotta tell you that story someday about him getting on stage at Sales Mastery. Yeah, I made the introduction of Dan to Todd to have him speak at that event, and I'm just gonna tell the story really quick and Dan might watch this episode. So I was on a coaching call with Todd, and I was coaching with him at the time. He was my executive coach. And he said, I said, how's Sales Mastery coming? He goes, I really need like someone who's like, I don't even know if he said social media, but someone who's like online and gets their business from online and so on and so forth. I said, and I just hired Dan, and Dan works for us today, but he worked for me way back then as well. And I said, I got the perfect guy for you, Todd. He's excellent. He just joined us, but he's great. And I walked downstairs and I said, hey, Dan, I said, and those of you that know Dan Keller and have seen him speak, you'll know that this, he was at a different place back then. And I said, hey, Dan, I said, Todd Duncan's going to give you a call. I recommended him to have you as a guest speaker at Sales Mastery around this idea of social media and so on and so forth. And so the next morning I walked in, I said, hey, Dan, did Todd call you? How'd that go? He goes, yeah, he did, but I didn't pick up the call. And I go, okay, well, did you call him back? And he goes, no, I haven't called him back yet. And I'm like, and I think he was like nervous, right, to talk to Todd, right? Because Todd's like, an icon, and this was, and Dan had just gotten the mortgage business in 2008, right? So he was just a couple of years in the mortgage business, and so I said, well, I said, call Todd, like seriously, like let's go, So anyway, so long story short, he talks to Todd. And I don't know if the conversation didn't go great or whatever, but I talked to Todd, again, I said, hey, how'd that call go with Dan? He goes, I just don't know if he's the guy. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, he is definitely the guy. And so long story short, he goes, oh, okay. So anyway, him and Dan work it out. Dan speaks at Sales Mastery. I was there. You were there, obviously. It was super impactful. He killed it, man. I mean, he absolutely slayed it. And I remember Todd coming up, go, oh man, that was a great recommendation. And Dan did an awesome job. And the rest of the story is history. But it's a funny story. But what it also goes to show you is, I knew what Dan was doing with social media back then and how, 87% of his business was coming from online. It was something very different than anyone else was doing at the time. But even Dan Keller, was nervous about having a conversation with Todd. Todd, because of that, it didn't really resonate, with Todd, that I don't know if this is the expert I'm looking for. And then he gets up there, he was polished, he was ready. I don't know if you remember, but he started by bringing up his phone and I think he was streaming it on Periscope. Is Periscope even still a thing? But I remember that. And so anyway, it was, but it just goes to show you that taking that step, and doing the thing. And from there, obviously, and Dan was a really good at marketing and all that stuff way before this. I mean, that's why he excelled so quickly in the mortgage industry. And
he's
almost
very educationally driven. Like he's not your TikTok, like, and that's also something that I think when people hear social media, they think it's like dances or they have to do these, trending audios, and that's, social media looks very different for a lot of people. But even someone in your position, like I would think if you're going to recruit someone, do you look at their social before you start to engage? I mean, how do you personally use social from a social proof standpoint?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's very few people that I talk to that I mean, if it's a business type of conversation, I definitely go to LinkedIn and I want to see their resume, their background, how many companies they've been with, right? So even though that's not social media content, it's using a social media platform to validate who this person is. I mean, if they don't have a LinkedIn profile, like that right there says a lot to me about, who they are as a professional, right? And if they don't have any sort of social media to the point that you made earlier, I'm going to be like, okay, so you work in sales and you have no platform. Now, there are people that are the exception. So it's not 100%, but it's definitely like, okay, that's a red flag. I need to understand what's going on there a little bit better, So there's clues that you will, kind of gather from that research. But I absolutely go to people's, Facebook. I go to their, Instagram. I'm not on TikTok. Actually, I was going to ask you about TikTok, so we'll get to that in a second. But yeah, absolutely. I think that utilizing, to your point, every customer does this. Every realtor that you're looking to get business from is going to check you out on social media, and what they see there is going to have them make some sort of decisions about who they think you are based on what's there, good, bad, or otherwise.
So if I asked you 3 separate questions, which platform do you like to consume on the most from like just an escape activity? Like you're just,
YouTube.
Yeah. Okay. YouTube. Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And then the one that you would go to for social proof from a recruit, which
Facebook or LinkedIn.
Okay.
But I mean, Facebook is the first place that I go. Like I had a conversation with someone today. I want to know a little bit more about them. I go to Facebook and but I'm showing my Gen X right now. So.
And then the last one is if you were trying to learn something.
Also, YouTube.
YouTube. Okay.
I use YouTube a lot. I mean, I am a
number one.
Yeah, I'm a premium subscriber to YouTube. I listen to it in the background. I prefer all my podcasts in video. I go there to, get entertained, but also I go there to learn, specific things as well. I don't do a lot of scrolling. Like I don't use Instagram that much. I don't use X or Twitter at all.
Okay. Are you a sports guy?
Not really.
Okay. I hear more men talk about Twitter who are sports, but it's a great place to go to also learn that you may want to check out because it has great, like Logan, a lot of things that people wouldn't put on Instagram or Facebook, they put on Twitter or X.
All right. I think I need to, what I did do is when I went and got my name. So I have my name on Twitter. I have a Twitter handle with my name. So I didn't have to end up with a bunch of numbers after it or some weird stuff. And I did that years ago. So maybe I need to engage with that a little bit more. So let's talk a little bit about, well, I could probably go on for hours, but I want to bring this to a landing. But I do want to ask you quickly about posting in particular. Then I want to talk about TikTok. So when you think about content, we had a coaching call with Dan actually the other day, and he said, look, putting up the company provided flyer of the week is not marketing. That's not marketing. You need to do more than that. You need to create a video. You need to create content. Even if it's not a video, it's something like you said earlier, that's helping solve someone's problem. It's educational in nature. And gets people to really engage with your content. What are your thoughts about the different types of posts that people do? Because I see a lot of people share the tip of the week or, maybe a program flyer, for instance, or even, like when loan amounts change, people will, their company will build out a social media post for that, and then they'll reshare that post. Is there any place for stuff like that, or does it have to be maybe just use that sparingly for informational purposes, but then you have to also create your own content? And then when you're thinking about your own personal content, obviously, like I'm in a studio, I got 3 cameras, we got a professional microphone, we got lighting, we got all this stuff. Like that's one thing, and one thing I don't do great at, which I think I need to do more of, is just pulling out my phone and making a raw video of what's going on. I mean, I see you do videos in your car or whatever, just like, Ken Perry does that. I was talking to him about, I love his videos when he's in his car and he's like getting ready to walk into the office. He's like, I just had to share this, thing. And it's great. And I need to probably do more of that. So maybe just touch on the types of content and maybe what are some things that people should stay away from that you see happening way too often. Anything like that.
There's a big shift from the over-productionized video content. And psychologically, it's the reason why I could make the exact same post on your personal Facebook page or profile and then your business page. It's the exact same post. But you're going to get more engagement and more response on your personal profile because the delivery or the context, it feels like you're sharing, you're educating, you're just informing. If it's from your business page, the context or psychologically feels like you're marketing, and people don't want to be marketed to. And so that's what we've seen with the, all of last year, it was all about, the over edited videos, because ultimately you're rewarded by people's retention time. Like, do they watch the video all the way to the end? And so what you would see is editors would use all these distractions to try to keep your attention all the way to the end. And people, I will just say, as soon as marketers figure out what works, we then overdo it, which is why the goalpost constantly changes. But at the end of the day, people want to connect. They want to feel like they belong. And this doesn't matter if, AI takes over and what happens with technology. People are starved for true intimacy and connection. So when you do see those videos where someone's just talking into their phone, it feels authentic. It doesn't feel pre-packaged where there could be a motive attached to it. And so even though people love to scroll on social but they'll tell you, I don't want to be marketed to and I don't want to be sold to, but they love to buy.
So is overproduced different than like the quality piece? So like, for instance, like being in a studio with like really expensive camera, all that, like that's high production value, but then there's like this high edited, captions, clip-ins, all that stuff. Those are two different things, right? Or do they both?
Okay. It is over productionized, meaning where your edits are trying to capture someone's attention, where it's because of what you're saying isn't valuable enough for me to, keep watching. It just feels, it's almost like there's a reason why you don't see commercials for apples. Because like everybody knows apples is good for you, but you're going to see commercials for Oreos or Cheetos, so if it feels like marketing, it creates resistance. Now, when you're creating content, what most don't realize is the different benefits per feature. So like there's 4 different algorithms to the platforms. Like most think it's just one. There's actually 4. So if you're trying to grow and get discoverability and reach of more non-followers, then you're going to want to focus on the reels or the carousel posts, because those are meant and encouraged to go to more people who aren't following you. But for nurturing, when you do a feed post versus like a story post, those typically go to more people who are already following you. So it's meant more for like nurturing. But at the end of the day, every single post type shouldn't always be the same. And that's where when I see too many branded posts in a row, even for my own clients, because some of our clients, we do all of their posting, we do all of their likes, their comments, like I'm pretty much their proxy, which is why today I had posted, I don't know which personality I am, because I already feel like I have multiple personalities depending on who I am at that moment. But it's a cocktail mixture of, looking at your week. This is why I say capacity matters. So I'm always careful on when people are like, just tell me the magic formula. Like, how often should I post? It depends. It's kind of like when someone's like, well, which loan is best for me? It's like, well, it depends. There's all these factors, but you want to diversify between videos, between infographics, between carousels, between your story posts, between going live. Like I wouldn't recommend going live every day because then you dilute the whole live aspect. But when you do go live, it does allow you to interact with the audience. And so there's different reasons to post different types. But I always go through a checklist of like, who is this for? What is the purpose of this post? Am I trying to teach something? Am I trying to create like a screenshotable piece of content that can live in the photo section of my real estate partners for when they're out in the field? Why is it important? Does it create curiosity, which then leads to conversations, which should happen in the DMs? That's where conversion happens. And that's one thing I love, just even with the analytics from Instagram. I can see on every single post how many profile visits I got, how many of those profile visits turned into link taps, like they went to the website link, how many of them started to follow me because of that. So there's lots of data that we look at to then measure, okay, what's resonating with the audience? Like, what is it that they need? What are the misbeliefs out there? Just even why you should buy now. And it also being aware of you are a salesperson. So for most loan officers, I'm like,
turns out.
anyone who's listening to you is like, I don't think I've ever heard an agent or loan officer say now is not a good time to buy. But I would argue there are probably times that even if you were at the bar with someone and they're just your friend and they're like, Tony, I'm really thinking about buying, I just, came back from the Philippines. I don't quite have my job situation lined up yet. I also don't have a credit score. I'll probably be here about 6 months. Would you recommend that I go ahead and apply? Like there's certain scenarios that you're like, probably not. Like you're only going to be here 6 months and then you're going back. Like, it depends on your goals, but there's times when it doesn't make sense and there's times that it does. So it's not being attached to the outcome and creating content that your ideal audience, which is also, for loan officers, they struggle with the same thing, Tony, of it being referral partners and then the end user. And it's okay to have content pillars that attack multiple different audiences, because you should have like an ideal avatar of the type of partner you like to work with, which sometimes is easier to think of the ones that you don't want to work with. And then same thing with your clients. Like I loved first-time homebuyers because I could educate, I could nurture, I could get repeat business from them. I did not like the jumbo, high analytical, high C type clients that I'm like, I don't know. Like, again, it kind of goes back to the types of even students I like to teach. So you have move-up buyers, you have downsizing, you have first-time home buyers, you have construction, you have reverse, you have custom, loans for custom construction jobs. There, you have divorcing. I mean, there's all kinds of challenges that buyers have. It just comes down to who are the people that you want to serve, what are the problems that they have, and then speak to those problems. But don't feel like you have to do it all on your own, because I would argue if you had a better system in place that you could get your clients to be the future of your marketing department if you actually did an exceptional job where, even just interviewing someone from 2 years ago that's like, hey, I know you were a first-time home buyer, Tony, 2 years ago, and you were really nervous to make that decision. In fact, if I recall, your parents and everyone around you was telling you, don't do it, the market's going to crash. Why would you ever go $50,000 over list price? But I just want to show you what your house is worth today. And had you waited, here's what your house today would sell for and what that monthly payment would be. So first and foremost, you should be very proud of yourself for making that decision. Let's look at how much equity that's grown. And then I'd love to interview you, or, I'm big on interviews, but maybe they would do a video themselves of just, would you be willing to share your story? Like, how did you overcome that fear? How did you know it was time to buy? Looking back, this is how much more you would have spent in rent. And so that is like user-generated content that's from, it's like you're just making them the hero of their story, but it's through your vessel of why you do what you do. And that is the biggest miss I see that most aren't doing, because they all tell me, I help people build wealth through real estate. And I'm like, cool. So does every other loan officer. You guys all say the same thing. Prove it to me.
Show me. So one of my questions, or one of my last questions, is around TikTok. So I am not on TikTok, as I mentioned. But I just saw like last week or whatever, there was like, and I don't even know the story, but everything I saw on social media was TikTok, Congress just voted, TikTok's going away. And then some people are like, this is, it's about time. And other people are like, this is massive intervention, government intervention, blah, blah, blah. What's actually happening with TikTok? And is it a platform that you think is going to go away? Should people be investing in that? Because it certainly gets a lot of people's attention. There's no question about that.
So the House of Representatives did state that they were banning TikTok, and it's because it's owned by ByteDance, which is a Chinese company. So there's risk and concern of, and some evidence out there showing that, they're using the data from us who are creating content to their advantage. The irony of it all is they are probably the least restrictive of like our freedom of speech. the American social platforms will filter more of what we see and control a lot of what we see than what we actually realize. But the biggest lesson of all of this is you don't own your social media. So don't put all your eggs in one basket. I'm a big believer you need to be everywhere every day, but not physically everywhere every day. So we have a scheduling tool that you just make one post and it'll auto post for you based off when your audience is most active, so you can be everywhere every day. But also, how are you looking to convert followers into people for your database or an email list? Because again, if that gets shut down, you've done all this work for what? Like you don't own it. And then I really think someone else like Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk will end up buying TikTok or bring back like Vine. Vine was an old app. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah.
There's too much money being made off TikTok. And I go to TikTok to learn probably first because I have trained the algorithm to show me. That's the other thing. Like people will blame the algorithms or blame the content. And I'm like, no, like make no mistake. Social's goal is to feed the addiction. They are constantly studying your behaviors to show you what you want to see so that you stay on the app longer. So when I do discovery calls and I pull up someone's For You page and I'm like, that's weird. There's a bunch of, it's like guns, golf, and half naked chicks. Like, no idea why that's on your For You page as a loan officer. Like it could be because it knows what you look at and what you want to see. So we can sit there and blame it, or you can actually train it so that you micro learn versus just mindlessly scrolling. And that's really the scariest part of it all, is we allow social to use us and we become little robots instead of us learning how to use it to deepen connections, to get seen by the right accounts so that we can then convert and either do business or get referrals from the people that, we interact with. But people just will post and ghost and blame, like, I only got 2 likes, or they will consume. Like the very people who tell me they hate social, I'll look at their screen time and I'm like, wow, you average 8 hours a day on social media. 8 hours. For someone who hates it, that means you're a consumer, not a producer. So that's another place where we start is I'm like, let's just see, if you tell me you don't have time, let's just see where your time goes, because this thing doesn't lie. And I'll be like, wow, you're on your top 3 apps a day. Now, if you're using it for prospecting, I'll give you a pass. Just most aren't. They're just mindlessly letting social use them, market to them, and they're not flipping the script where they're prospecting using the tool. They're liking and commenting so that, showing up in the notifications, that little red dot. If you ever watch people, like I'm the weirdo at the airport that's like literally watching, sometimes filming how people scroll, the first app that they go to is the one that there's the little red notification. So it's like if you're trying to get some agent partner's attention and you think just posting and praying that the algorithm is going to show your piece of content to them at the right moment, when, oh, by the way, there's 5,300 posts every second that you're competing with, okay? It's like, instead, why don't you just show up as their biggest fan in their notifications so they keep seeing your name over and over and over, and all of a sudden they're like, man, this Deborah Byrd chick, she's really consistent. Like, I really feel seen. I feel heard. It's touching the show me that you know me button. So I like TikTok. I don't like that it's owned by ByteDance. That is concerning. Although the part of me wonders how much has already been breached as it is. And you look at the censorship of the United States platforms, I'm like, do we really have freedom of speech here? But I use it as my short nuggets of learning, especially with AI lately. There's some great content creators that, they share their wisdom. And, you think about the old days, you would have to pay a hefty ticket to go attend a course or go to school and travel. It's like my whole social story was when I was, in my bathtub crying, having a pity party for myself, wondering how I was going to get out of debt many years ago. Social media was the best friend that I couldn't push away, where I would consume Tony Robbins and Bob Proctor and Dan Keller and Bill Hart, where it helped pull me out of a bad place, not because I had to raise my hand and ask for help because I'm not good at that, but because I could consume from others, where it just, allowed me to get there faster when I had 4 toddlers and there was no way I was going to be able to travel. So there's a lot of good that comes from it, but like anything, there's always the opposite is true as well.
Yeah, 100%. Well, Deborah, we could probably go on for all day with this conversation, but we need to bring this to a close. I definitely, I'm going to suggest that if you are watching this and you're a loan officer or a real estate agent, and you need some help with social media, I would check out Deborah's content that you can find online. Check out Plug and Play social media. Deborah, I know I need to talk to you because what I don't like is when I look at even though I've come a long way, I post a podcast every Friday, I'm very consistent. I create that into other content. But if you look at like my Market Shares Instagram, it's just, they all look the same. They're all clips from so I got work to do. I can improve. I know that I can. I want to be more organic with some of the stuff that I do, and I know that I can do that. So I'm going to be reaching out to you myself to probably get a little coaching and talk about how you can help me take my stuff to the next level. But for those of you in the audience, check out Deborah and her stuff. And is there anywhere in particular you would point them to, Deborah, as far as getting a hold of you?
So my preferred platform is Instagram. And, you could click the link in my bio, which, by the way, guys, that's a great thing to also have. If you don't have a link tree in your bio, it makes it difficult for things like this. Or you can just go to Plug and Play, which you spell out the sm.com. But we start with a discovery call just to make sure it's a good fit and that we can solve the challenges that you may be having. And by now, if I don't feel like maybe we could accomplish what you're looking for, I know enough people in the space who could, that I could refer you to. So it's just an easy conversation. You do get me. I know I've been coached on the fact that I shouldn't be doing my own discovery calls, but I love it because I get to learn from the trenches. And, it's what I enjoy the most about my days is just hearing from you guys. So it is free. It's a 30-minute call. And let's just explore kind of your pain points, what you're looking for. It's non-committal. And grow together. So,
well, that makes it easy, Deborah. There's no reason not to reach out to Deborah. Well, cool. Well, hey, thanks again for not only letting me ask you some of my questions that I had, but also sharing so much of your knowledge for free with our audience. I really appreciate it. I want to get into some other things that we didn't get to, so that's okay. Maybe we'll do another episode someday, but I look forward to seeing you. I know there's some conferences and different mortgage events coming up. I'm sure I will see you at one of those, as I usually do. And until next time, folks, I appreciate you coming in and taking your time to watch Market Shares. That's when I think about the commitment that people have who come up to me and say, hey, I watch every one of your episodes, or I got a lot from that episode. That tells me that you committed some time into paying attention to what it is that we're talking about. So to our audience, thank you for your time. And if this content is something that you enjoy, we do put out a new episode every single Friday. So please feel free to subscribe to the page so that you don't miss one of those episodes. Deborah, I will see you again. Everyone else, take care.